Here we go, Con. Ready?
Yep.
All right, friends. It is hopefully wonderful to see all of you. Bob Mosier here, Apply Synergies. My dear friend, Dr. Con Gottfredson, also on the screen. We so pleased that you joined us. We wish it was under different circumstances. We are thinking of all of you. You are our colleagues, friends across the globe. You are in our thoughts and prayers. When this hit, we wanted to see what we could do to give back, help. Right? I think I've seen remarkable things in our industry happening, and so we are just thrilled that you've joined us. We hope the 90 minutes won't be too painful. In a moment, we're going to turn off video. We would ask folks, if you don't mind, to do the same, as well as keep your audio muted. We'll talk about interactions in just a second. The only reason, friends, is you can imagine across the globe, bandwidth is an issue. And we have many people visiting us internationally. So please, if we don't mind, we ask you to do that. Con, you want to say a quick hi? Introduce yourself?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be with you today, and looking forward to sharing with you some very powerful thoughts that we hope and believe will be helpful.
So friends, we are recording this. Just a quick, there I am. Hey, see me waving there in my office here in Fort Mill, South Carolina, for our international friends. That's just south of a city called.
Ja, ik heb het zo.
Please be sure you mute, folks. Please be sure you click on your mute. Get your silence your microphones. Thanks. Just south of Charlotte, North Carolina, in the States, and Con is in beautiful where?
Utah, just south of Salt Lake City. Woke up this morning to snow on the ground, so spring is not quite with us here.
So here we go, friends. Here's what we're going to do. For the next 90 minutes, and we are recording this, we will send out the links after, as well as access to the handouts. Con, I'm going to hit my video off so that we can, again, be sure to save on bandwidth if you want to do the same. We just wanted to do a quick hi and say hello to everybody. And again, please, everybody coming in, please be sure that you do turn off your video and mute your mics. We're only doing that, friends, because of bandwidth issues, although we would love to see all of you. So do please be sure that you have your microphones muted and videos off, if you don't mind, because again, we are trying to save on bandwidth. So I see some folks still with video out there. If you wouldn't mind turning the video off, it'd be great. Again, not that we don't want to see you. We're just trying to do our best with bandwidth. So here we go. And we're going to set up for chat, friends. We're going to do an awful lot of interactions with chat. So here's what you might want to do. Up by where it should say you are viewing Bob's screen, this is a suggestion to help you lay your screen out a little better. If you click on the view options next to my name at the green bar, there is a side-by-side mode that will let you put my slides a little bit to the left or right there. And then you can add your chat window, as I've pictured here on my screen. You can drag it over there to the right, and then you'll be able to chat with everyone. Please be sure, please be sure that you're at the bottom of the chat window, friends, that the blue dot does say everyone, that you are sending your message to everyone, because we're going to do a whole lot of chatting to try to get some engagement going as we talk about the model. So here we go. I'm going to start my timer for 90 minutes to be sure we're honoring your time. So we'd love to know where you're from. Let's practice chat a little bit. Would you open up the chat window if you haven't already, and would you put where you are coming to us from in the chat window? Another Charlotte, Netherlands. Look at that. Holy cow, it's going fast. Wisconsin, Georgia, Seattle, Amsterdam, Utah, Detroit, Washington. You guys are quick learners. Spectacular. So appreciate the our international friends. Northern Germany. Wow, UK, Virginia. And we're up to, my gosh, you guys, we're up to 177 and climbing. That's really spectacular. We're going to actually maybe hit our maximum here if we're not careful. That's just wonderful, friends. Great to have you all in here and to get to know, hopefully, all of you. And you did great at the chat. Let's keep that up. Con, you want to go through the agenda for us?
Sure. So, team, we're here, and we've got a lot to cover in 90 minutes. We're recording this, as you know, and so if you need to step out, please know that that's okay. But we're going to start today with kind of getting to know you with a couple of polling questions so that we can kind of gear what we do to gear, and then we'll introduce the gear model and talk about that. And then we want to spend some time on how to best gather online to learn in the virtual classroom. We're going to talk about each component, the E part of gear, expand and apply, and a very important part, receiving feedback. And all the guidance that we're going to give you is within that framework. What we want you to know is that our approach here today is to focus on how to transform existing courseware, and to do it rapidly. So there's much more systematic, in-depth, and time-consuming options here, but our goal is to help give you the quick path through it all, and to be able to apply that not in creating new virtual workflow learning solutions, but translating what it is that you have into the gear model. So we're going to move rapidly today. We'll make this recording available, and there's a few resources that we'll make it available as we go.
Thanks, my friend. Brilliant. Again, friends, remember, please, those who have joined us later, please be sure that you are muting your video if you don't mind, or hiding the video. Not that we don't want to see y'all, as we say in South Carolina, but we want to be sure that we are preserving bandwidth. We have a number of folks joining from across the globe, and we know that bandwidth is an issue in some parts. So appreciate you doing that for us, friends. So let's get to know each other a little better. We're going to do some polling here. So what we'd like you to do is, first of all, we want to get a sense for two aspects of designing for online, right? First is the idea about just being able to do the design. How many of you out there, and what's your experience in designing? And again, these are anonymous polls, by the way. So hopefully on your screen, a poll has occurred. Would you let us know where you are as an organization in your experience with designing for online? You should be able to take the poll online. I see people doing it in the chat. Is the poll launched so you can click in? No poll slide.
I don't see it launched there.
That's interesting. I wonder if that's a thing with sharing my screen. I thought that's my fault, friends. Well, good. I see a lot of you in there. Good. You're such a good group. You're putting it in the chat. Some 4s, bunch of 2s and 3s. 2s and 1s. So yeah, kind of a 3 or lower on average, I think. Got some 4s. That's brilliant. Good. Let's try another one. Let's try another one, friends. That's spectacular. And my friends, I do apologize about the poll. Here's another one. How about teaching online? Where would you put yourself or your team in instructing online? There's a 5. That was brilliant, Dave. Saw that go by. Couple 5s streaming by there. That's brilliant. Look at you guys. You're so good. Nice. Thank you. Sharon, brilliant. Yep. A lot of 2s and 1s. It looks to me, and again, guys, I so apologize. I wish the poll had worked. So we could see a better aggregate, but it looks like the training side might be a little lower in aggregate than the design side, which is fine, because they really are 2 aspects of this, right? And we're going to be sure to get into both of those as we go. Perfect. Thanks, friends. Oops, there's one more person to let in. Con, you want to talk a little bit about the importance of blend and sort of how we started to get into gear as a model?
Sure. This is really important. You know, the notion of blending has been around forever, and it surfaced a number of years ago. But the approach to blending was really tied to not necessarily modalities, but within a modality, doing something before, during, and after, and stretching out. We're going to talk about blending in a very powerful way, and it has to do with blending the virtual classroom with workflow learning. So would you just enter into chat what you feel are the strengths of the virtual classroom? What is it about the virtual classroom that is so powerful?
Only way to go. Look at that. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Right? Low cost, agile.
Agile. You can all see the response there.
Train without
Those are,
travels. Yeah.
you know, remarkable reasons. And obviously that's why you're here, right? You're seeing the strengths, but we also need to understand that along the way, maybe there are some weaknesses too, but we play to the strengths. You always, with every modality, you want to play to the strengths. And so here are some strengths that we've identified. Others are there, and we'll do a little journey of pulling all of this together. You know, the ideas that you have there as well, but we just want you to see there's tremendous reason for moving to the virtual classroom. About 15 years ago, Bob and I, if you want to go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Are we?
Yep. You seeing it, Con?
No.
You're not seeing why blend?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, yeah. So we wanted to, in terms of this question, as you look at these fundamental principles of instruction, Bob and I 15 years ago asked the question, can we do this? Can we really apply these principles in the virtual classroom? We wanted to know where the strength of instructional impact is exceptionally high. So would you look at these? These are, I'm sure you're all familiar, but where does virtual have a strength above other learning environments? When you look at these fundamental skills associated with learning. This is where Bob and I were about 15 years ago when we were stepping into the virtual classroom. What can it do really, really well? Just interested.
And this is for the workflow.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Bob.
It's okay.
So, in the modalities of work, we're looking at those strengths in the virtual classroom, but also the workflow and where the workflow can be helpful. So now the question is, where are the strengths in terms of these capabilities in the workflow? Any thoughts there?
And you can give us more than one number if you want in chat,
Yep.
friends. Which of these do you think stand out in the workflow as powerful principles? Love that. All if done correctly. You see the numbers to the right of them. You can put obviously more than one.
Yeah, unguided practice. I mean, the best unguided practice that you can have is in the flow of work where you have that context of things, right? The ability to have unguided practice is really, really powerful. And then 8, I see some of you putting 8, that ability to provide feedback and meaningful feedback based upon that performance. Very good. So we've put together a little comparison, and the intent of this is to just suggest that there is power in blending modalities, and not working with one modality, but blending them. And what our concern is today, we're seeing folks move from traditional classroom to virtual classroom, and we see and have experience, direct experience, that blending virtual classroom learning with the workflow is powerful. The same as blending traditional classroom with the workflow. The workflow brings exceptional capabilities to both of those other environments. And it's really a compelling reason for that blend. And hence, what we're going to do today is focus on the optimum blend of virtual and workflow learning in the GEAR model.
And you guys, there's a great question about what do we mean by the workflow. Con, you want to go a little bit more into that?
Yeah, workflow learning is where you intentionally put in place the capacity for learners to learn as they do their work. That is, to learn in the flow of work. And for us, it's learning at all 5 moments of need in the flow of work as you actually do your work. And so that's our definition and our view of workflow learning.
So friends, as we journey into gear, which is what we're going to start on now, a little bit of background. This blended methodology was actually created well over 10 years ago. We've used it multiple times since, uncountable amount of times since with our clients. Many of you know we have a certificate course that we offer around the 5 moments that is taught through this model. You know, and it really came about in an IT space when I was working for a large technology company, and we were trying to reach our techs in rural areas that they couldn't get to our classroom centers. And the biggest concern, of course, friends, were 2 things. Number one, what about the labs? You know, in technology training, the labs were so critical in our classrooms. You know, how do we have that happen? The second thing that a big concern was engagement. There was a real concern amongst our classroom instructors, which we're going to show in a moment actually was a complete myth, to be honest, that they thought that going from this face-to-face, intimate, 5 days, intense, lunches, breaks, hands-on, walking around the room experience to something that was 2-dimensional like this in what we called at the time distance learning, they literally thought it would be distancing by the nature. Well, the great news, friends, is that it was anything but that. The research that came back from that was staggering. In fact, our goal, to share a little bit about the end game, was we wanted the virtual classroom to match, if in best case, match our classroom evaluations. Just smile sheets, and not performance and such, but obviously the experience, right? That's what the smile sheets are very often about in training. Well, guys, here's the exciting thing. When it came back, not only did they do as well as our classroom evaluations, they exceeded our classroom evaluations. The participants felt that it was more engaging, gave them actual time to learn, to process, and to get one-on-one intimate feedback like they had never gotten before. And here's what we did. Yes, we gathered. This is what we hear a lot of going on in the industry right now. I have to take a course on leadership, a course on onboarding, a course on something, and I have to move it to virtual. And that's clearly a part of what we first think of with virtual instruction. But thanks to the brilliant work of Dr. Goffins here on the call, that's only a quarter of the experience. And again, to tip our hand a little bit, it was the least valued part of the experience. Let me say that again. When we did post-analysis of the gear model, the E, A, and R of gear, expand on personalized experience for deeper knowledge, apply what you are learning so you can actually in digestible chunks so that you can get some real life application. And then more importantly, receive feedback in spaced approaches that allow you to get better at it as you went along. So the way the gear model works, friends, and again, I'm going to get really, and Dr. Z, great point. All of this, friends, is supported in the workflow by something called performance support. And I saw something go by earlier that talked about the technology being an issue. We're going to show you today, frankly, folks, a pretty low-tech way to get started that works. You can buy an EPSS. You may have heard us talk about this before. You can buy LXPs. You can even use, to some degree, your LMS. But for many friends, particularly in the time we're living in today, those are big asks. Those are big purchases. We're going to show you today, over the years that we've done this, we've seen some fairly low tech, but quite powerful ways of supporting the process, E, A, and R in particular, with performance support. So here is the journey, friends. I'm going to get very operational for you. Orientation and expectations. Here's the thing, guys. For a lot of learners out there, here's what we learned. Many haven't done online instruction like we're doing to them now. They've done e-learning. Maybe they've sat through a webinar. But we're going to actually go, for many, and this is new in many companies, we're going to take them into true online instruction. So here's a couple things we learned. You can't jump to content till they feel comfortable with the environment and they understand the nature of what online learning is about. You have to set expectations up front, what this journey will be like. And can we give you another side note we learned? Don't call it a virtual classroom. Don't, and brand is everything, friends. We've learned. Anyone want to tell me in chat why you think it may not be great to call it a virtual classroom? It kind of bit us back, friends, because that was our original brand, by the way. Anyone have an idea why that might not have worked well? It sounds like a boring lecture. Seems to sound one directional. Aversion to technology, one way. I'm going to key off of one in particular, if I may. Martine, I think it is. Old school, 90s speak. Guys, here's the thing. When you say classroom to somebody, they've been in one since in our country than when they were 5 years old. They've sat in them in your classrooms, in your companies. You've been doing ILT for years. And here's the thing, friends. If you want to get to gear, if you want to get the impact we're talking about today, you've got to be careful about expectations. And so even something as simple as how you brand this, friends, is key, because if you say we're going to do virtual classrooms, virtual instruction, I agree with everything you're saying. There's legacy to that. People come in thinking they're predisposed to the situation, and candidly, they may not give the model the time to do well. Then you put them in a gather session. We'll talk about these in a minute, about length and time and the whole deal. On average for us, they were 2 hours. We'll talk about more about that in a moment. Clearly that can vary depending on content. Then you let them do an EA and R time. Expand, you see the tools we've used, but there's others. Apply, you see the tools we use, but there's others. And then receive feedback. And again, you see that that can be from multiple stakeholders. Then after some designated time, you go into gather 2, start it over again. And then of course you do an EA and R. We call these gather cycles, friends. So cycle 1, cycle 2. We've never done one with 1 gear cycle. Never done one with 1 gear. There's no such thing as 1 gear cycle. Frankly, that's a webinar, to be honest. You really want to use one of the most powerful learning strategies that's been validated in our industry for maybe centuries, and that's something called spaced learning. And so we really recommend you have a minimal of 2 gear cycles before you wrap, because why wouldn't you? If you can space your content out and chunk it, right, the better, and make it smaller and digestible, the better. And the time between the gathers, here comes the answer, it depends. We go minimally a week. We have been forced to go a couple days, but as you can imagine, to do EA and R, that's been hard. We've gone a couple weeks, 2 in between, to really give learners time to do EA and R in an in-depth way.
And of course, all of that is based upon the nature of what you're doing, and so you can apply the principles, according to your circumstances.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you get the course set up again. In that, make sure you hear us, friends. In that course introduction bullet, don't start teaching yet. Again, your learners they're juggling balls, we learned. And so content is one of them, right? Mastering new content is one of them. So what we really learned in that course introduction section is that you talk about the outline, you talk about the experience, you practice with the technology, you build a cohort through icebreaker kind of activities. There's a lot to be done. You talk about the nature of the course. You can do some pre-assessment. You can set some expectations, have them do some homework, some pre-work. Where I'm going with this is the course introduction is not a wasted time. In fact, it may be one of the most important segments of your gear model, because if that goes well, then once you get into content, which is harder with gear 1 and all the other gear cycles that follow, the more they understand and are comfortable with each other, the environment, and the expectations, the better. And you continue on to as many as you need and conclude. Questions at all? I'm kind of watching the chat. I saw about the EPSS, my apologies. Electronic Performance Support is the acronym. So that's the gist of the model. We're going to go into much greater depth now, friends, around the components, what make them better, how to begin to design for them, and so on.
Yeah, so let's take on the gather session here, that gathering in the virtual classroom. we're going to talk about 5 areas of focus for that gather session. First, you want to align it with the workflow, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, what we mean by that. And then,
folks, please be sure if you just came in that your microphones are muted. We are hearing someone's background. Thanks.
And then, of course, from there, we're going to distinguish knowing from doing, and then balance cognitive load and adjust and create meaningful interactions. This is a very important piece, the interactions, the way in which these are meaningful knowledge gaining, learning interactions, not just the degree in which people are engaged.
Well, Con, I'm sorry. You went on mute there. That was my fault. Can you come back?
Yeah, thank you. Well, you do have the power there, Bob.
Yeah, yeah.
So as you look at these 5 areas, we're going to quickly just take on each one of them and make sure you understand what we mean. We know that if you'll focus in these 5 areas, your gather sessions will really be powerful as you then prepare people to move into the workflow and expand and apply. So for align with the workflow, this is such an important principle here for us to focus on. Bob, do you and that the workflow is where people do their work, right? And one of the real challenges that we face in the world of learning is it's disconnected, so that when people with the workflow, so that when people step into the workflow, they've actually encoded in their minds a learning and information in ways that are different or outside of the workflow. If I were to ask every one of you to repeat the letters of the alphabet backwards by every 3rd letter, it would be difficult for you to do. It would slow you down. Well, we do that all the time. We train people in one way, i.e., this is how you recite the letters of the alphabet. And then when they get to the workflow, we say, no, the way we do it is every 3rd letter backwards. And that's the challenge. So up front, what you want to do is to find and define the workflow, to create what we call a workflow map, what you see here, and then to align how you train in the virtual classroom with that workflow.
Yeah, and you guys, the interesting thing is that the courses that you're converting, and this is something to look at, is that the outlines that you have now may not map to the workflow. In fact, I would, again, this is our experience, but from a lot of the classes we've watched and seen brought online, candidly, many of them don't. So when people are learning now in the workflow, we're moving instruction to the desktop. We're going to have them gather, expand, apply, and do, when they're going to go and do work in the context of their flow of the day. The more you can create these cognitive maps, even though the outline you bring over may not literally map from the workbook that you'll use. We'll talk about workbooks in a moment. These are important things to make because we're trying to make that mental transfer from being distanced in a classroom, to Con's point, learning the alphabet, and then driving or walking or entering the workflow and trying to make that cognitive jump to the day in, day out ways of doing work. So every time we do this design, as you see on the screen, this is an example of one, we create these workflow maps as a mental encoder, as a mental model for the learner to have throughout the entire gear experience and beyond, so that they can map to application.
Yeah, and you can leave your course structured as it is if there's no time to restructure it. But as long as you have a map and every module that you move through, you're tying to that workflow map, it will make a world of difference in terms of the transfer and actually application on the job.
So here's the next thing you're going to run into. And again, it's going to hit you in the face, frankly, you guys, way more than normal in a classroom. And that is that this distinction between knowing something and doing something. It's really interesting because a lot of times in lessons, you guys, we see the following things as an objective or a task, so to speak. The learner will understand the principles of leadership. the learner will know the sales process. Guys, those are not doings, those are knowing. And when you move virtual instruction to the desktop, it's really important that your learners can distinguish the difference between when you're teaching doing task at the top of this outline and when you're teaching knowing, which is at the bottom of the outline. And you'll notice that along the order on the left, under supporting knowledge below, we've mapped the supporting knowledge to the task it relates to above. And we're very careful in the task identification, the labeling, of making sure that those are verbs. I know I'm down the weeds, but this is important, that those are verbs and supporting knowledge are not. They really need to be able to make that distinction when they're learning while doing, when they're going to go from your virtual classroom in seconds. This is the beauty of this, friends. They go in seconds from your class to their work. As soon as you guys close Zoom, you're going to be you're going to be in the workflow again. So their ability to make that distinction becomes really important in how you create and reorient your lessons.
So, cognitive load, what do we mean by that? What you see on the right are a set of doing things, tasks, if you will, job tasks for caring for disabled employees. And we know from cognitive research that no mind can store all 20 of those tasks and the information under them and retrieve it and really do anything efficiently by trying to just commit all 20 of those to memory. So balancing cognitive load is just simply doing something that I'm sure most of you know all about already, and that is to apply the principle of chunking, to take this, to look through your courseware and to make sure that you're not creating cognitive load challenges, to look carefully and keep things in a scale of 7 plus or minus 2. So here we took those tasks, if you will, and we grouped them into 3 processes, what you see here: to communicate, exchange information, identify and enroll a patient. And we moved them under there, applying that principle of chunking. And that's all we would say. This is a wonderful opportunity, and it's especially vital as you move into an online virtual blend with workflow learning, that you make sure and check your work, your existing courseware, and make sure you balance cognitive load.
You know, and friends, here's a common question we get. How do you know, and there's 2 ways, frankly. How do you know what goes in the gather and what doesn't? How do you know what to push to EA&R? How do you know how large to make a gather session? Well, again, we're going to give you 2 approaches, and we're going to talk about 2 approaches in a moment. But one of them is this principle con sharing. The beauty of the virtual classroom is you can't take an 8-hour class and move it online and make people sit there for 8 hours. They will not do it. You're probably going to struggle in a bit sitting here with us for 90 minutes, right? So the power here is that this model makes us chunk better. This model makes us be cognizant of cognitive load. Whereas a classroom, I'll be honest, right? A classroom struggles with this because it's a residential, you got them for a day or 2 model that we've got to optimize that face time, and I get it. But I think we all agree in this call, we overteach, friends. We way overteach in a classroom. We way overteach in e-learning, right? But here's the beauty, friends. When you get into gear and gather, you can chunk these out in manageable cognitive loads. But here's my favorite part: in manageable application loads, right? Because remember, you're going to do EA&R in a minute. Your learners are going to leave your gather and they're going to move into expand, apply, and get feedback. And what a remarkable way over time in cognitively balanced gathers to help people learn and apply in a very powerful way. Okay, meaningful interactions. This is huge, huge. And we'll be honest, we're doing our best during this, what frankly is more of a webinar than workshop, to get you engaged. We're watching chat. You're doing terrific in the back channel. But this is big, friends. And this is the thing. Well, it depends on how good you are. Depends on how good your instructors are at ILT. But let's assume they're the brilliant ones, right? People love them because they keep them engaged. People love them because they've developed tricks and ways in which to manage interactions in a classroom. Well, this is big online because you're staring at a screen. So we're going to go through a number of ways to help you define and manage intentional interactions. There'll always be happenstance. There'll always be, well, raise your hand if, right? The instructors do all the time. But here's our recommendation to you, friends. When we first did this model over 10 years ago, we were not as intentional about scripting interactions as we're about to recommend. And guess what? Instructors wung it. And many brilliant face-to-face instructors became painfully boring online. So determine if the interaction should engage individual, small. So we're going to get very minute in the definition of what interaction is and how to manage them in a classroom in ways that, frankly, I don't think we've ever done in stand-up. 2, determine if it should be a workbook or a real-time interaction. We're going to talk about the power of this. Workbooks are stunning in online instruction, particularly the gear model, for a number of reasons we'll talk about in a moment. 3, select the type of interaction you want. And we're going to share with you 6 interaction types that we've come up in and used in our work. I'm sure there are more. But when we juggle our design, we manage 6. And last, develop and adapt the interactions that you have now. You're bringing over a class that's good. Talk to your instructors about what they do in their classes when they engage their students. And not just practices. Those are written into the book. Talk to your trainers about, look, when you teach this lesson, what kind of questions to ask and when and why? Give me your 3 favorite questions. Do you do metaphors? Do you put them in small groups and make them talk? Right? A lot of stuff that is not in the instructor guide or in any book, right? You want to be able to take those things and make them intentional online. So, Con.
So we're going to engage you in a few interactions here, team, as we move forward here. And the key is meaningful. And one of the challenges that we face is, you know, in a classroom, you could call on an individual or you could break folks into small groups. But it's very challenging to engage the entire class in an interaction in the classroom, but it's great and easy to do in the virtual classroom. But all of these different levels of engagement are important to consider in the virtual world. So what we'd like you to do right now is think about a virtual environment, a gather session. And then I'd like you to identify the advantages and disadvantages in that virtual environment of being able to call on an individual, to engage an individual in an interaction that the rest of the group is watching and listening to. Would you enter into chat what the advantages of that would be to learning and to furthering learning?
Yeah, I love it, Gregory. Be careful in how you call them, right? Do you have to call on them or invite them to? But again, at an individual level.
Yeah, and then there are times where you do that once, and if it's non-threatening, then everybody pays attention because they could be called on too. But it also allows you, it keeps your attention, you can see, allows others time to think about their own answer. Very good. Yeah, everyone, the invitation does bring that attention. Those are some great reasons for all of that. What are the disadvantages? Just add a few disadvantages here, team.
Yeah, they know they might get called on, right? That's the attention grabber, right? Everyone's concerned about, you guys, one of the big things was the email problem. We really thought that students would do email. We found they didn't do much, if any at all, if you do interactions well.
Yeah, and in reality, if you have only one person thinking and processing, the others can check their email. So the ability to check out is pretty high when you're calling on individuals, as well as the challenge of creating stress and people worrying about that. Very good. Let's talk about small groups. What would be the advantages of being able to break organization, your class into small groups virtually? Very good. This allows collaborative learning, doesn't it? Some very strong collaborative learning that you see there. Wonderful. What are the disadvantages? Let's just plug in there.
And friends, we will aggregate these wonderful responses after. So great stuff. Yeah, group dynamics, right? You lose control. Someone dominates the group. Needs time to generate. You got to have your act together, friends, to do small group online.
Yeah, and in the virtual classroom, the instructor isn't able to be there overseeing that, even as well as you could in a face-to-face where folks can raise their hands and other things, although that can happen. Now, the gem of the virtual classroom is where you engage the entire class in that interaction. So every learner is engaged in thinking and processing and learning. So advantages?
Yeah, look at that. Fun. Yeah, engaging. Great ideas are shared. Time efficient. Multiple viewpoints. Brilliant.
And we've also found that when you have those kinds of activities, you really find out who's not engaged.
Yep. Yep.
If you want to measure the engagement level, you create an entire class engagement activity, and you see who's participating and who's not, in that journey. We found in the GEAR model that we know where everyone is and where they're going better than we've ever been able to do in a face-to-face environment. What about the disadvantages of calling on the entire or engaging the entire class? Any? Yeah.
Chaos, loss of control. Noisy.
Yeah.
Superficial. Some get lost. Too many ideas. Hard to manage. Messy. A lot of messy. A lot of management stuff.
So that's why you want to be intentional.
Yep.
In your engagement, and where you want to use each of these according to their strengths and compensate or prepare against the disadvantages.
Brilliant.
Bob?
Yeah, and friends, I want to key off of one thing that you're being very perceptive about is that what we learned more than we ever did in classroom when we went to virtual was the nature of self-efficacy. You guys know what self-efficacy is, right? A learner's ability to feel that they are not just learning stuff, but they're learning it and can do it, that they can grow beyond the class, that they can, right? The classroom dynamic and interactions are a real interesting part of that. And one thing to understand is that the size of the group that you're all being very keen to, but as well as the interaction type, which we'll get to in step 3 in a moment, they have a level of courage and putting people on the spot, of risk involved in all of them. There's a level of courage and there's a level of risk involved in all of them. So when you design your intentional interactions, please be careful that you're also measuring that. And we'll talk about it in a minute as well. So workbook. Do this, friends. Look at it. See the chat there in the bottom left? What are the advantages of having a learner complete an interaction in their workbook rather than having them participate online in an impromptu manner like we're doing now? Or even an intentional, look at you, takeaway reference, less groupthink, safer. Look at you guys, you're nailing it. Reference for later, work at their own speed, time efficiency, love that. They have a hard copy they're walking away with. They think, oh my gosh, I love that, Nancy.
Yeah, and you're able to take time to learn. The learner, a workbook activity allows you to devote more time to working through an activity and thinking about it, and still engaging everyone as they do that, as you then move to your debrief.
Brilliant. Love all this. Writing imprints knowledge. It slows things down, friends. It gives space to process. Be quiet during this activity, by the way. Oh, it's okay. A lot of instructors get nervous of dead air time virtual. Whereas opposed in the classroom, they might be much more comfortable with waiting the classic, for instance, 9 seconds for an answer. I don't know if you ever heard that old method around questioning, right? Give people 9 seconds to answer. They get quiet on virtual, and 2 seconds seems like 2 minutes. But when they're doing workbook, the learner is working on their stuff. They're doing some higher level thinking in workbook activities than you can often do impromptu or even through staged interactions. So let them have that time. And also, friends, because this is an important thing, because you're going to spread your gear out, remember, through multiple cycles, multiple weeks, potentially multiple months. Our certificate course, you guys, is a 3-month course. 3 months. The workbook becomes the tie that binds. The EPSS becomes their imprint, their encoder Con talked about earlier. That because frankly, because you're breaking stuff up, which is wonderful, you're also breaking stuff up. so learners, they lose their place. They lose the order that sitting through us for 8 hours gave. So the workbook is really a critical part of the activity. Interaction types, Con.
Yeah, so there are lots of types of interactions, lots of ways to build an interaction in a virtual gather session. We've identified 6 types. For example, look at this question that we have here. What would you say what would you call that kind of an interaction, where we're asking all of you to describe what you think the difference is between intentional and unintentional interactions? We know what they are, but we're not sure that you know what they are, but we're asking all of you to figure that out and enter that into chat. What kind of a
yeah, give us a word, give us a label for that kind of question.
Yep. What kind of an interaction do we have? Yeah, so some of you are responding to the interaction, and that's really great. Kind of led you
Some of you are actually answering the question. We're actually wondering if you can tell us what kind of an interaction that question is. What is an example? And by the way, you're all wonderful. But what is that question an example of?
Yeah. Yeah, it is an intentional interaction. The 6 types are all intentional. So this is what we call a discovery interaction type. This is where you create an interaction where you're not sure whether they know or not, but by moving through the activity, you come to an understanding of that. You discover the understanding of that. That's a very effective type of interaction that you can bring into the gather session. Let's keep moving on through these types. Bob?
Well, let me ask you a quick question, friends, because I want to be sure we're covering an important principle here. How risky or courageous do you think, on a 1 to 5, 5 being high risk, 1 being none, how do you think a discovery question plays out in a class to learners? 1 being no risk at all, 5 being high risk. Look at you. Good.
That, by the way, was an unintentional interaction. So we had planned this interaction, and then Bob, in his brilliant teaching way, came up with another interaction, which was unintentional in terms of we didn't design for it, but because of his skills, he brought that about. Great example, Bob.
Well, thank you, Con. But what I want to bring you back to, friends, is, do you see the variance? Some people said 5. Some people gave it a 1. Here's what changes it, friends. Remember earlier the individual, small group, or entire class? Remember it? That often is what can make a discovery question high risk or a discovery question no risk. If I do it on a whiteboard, right? Where I'm just marking up a whiteboard or I'm just writing, and no one has any idea who I am. Or I do it in a large group or a fairly safe activity, it's probably, frankly, a 1, and it does push the learner to think. If I call on Khan or that kind of a thing, or frankly, listen to this, you guys, even if I use chat, because look what's happening on the chat, you guys, I know who all of you are. I know how you're answering the question. My name is labeled to an answer. It can all of a sudden shut a class down. Because a discovery question by nature asks a learner to come up with something that they don't know or you haven't taught them yet. You're trying to get them to discover the answer, and it can be high risk if put on the spot.
And hence why discovery interactions sometimes make better sense moving into the workbook or finding some other way to ensure that they can be anonymous, i.e. polling or other things in terms of discovery. But you got to think through this in the way that Bob has shared.
Okay, friends, activity number 2, notice the donuts. Love donuts. So again, don't answer the question, sorry. But look at this one. You would ask your students to develop a rating scale by the following, these steps. And then they would go through those steps 1 through 3. What kind of an interaction is that, do you think? Give it a label. And again, it's not really a correct answer here, but we'll give you ours in a moment. Activity, love that, Buzz guy. Scripted, Julie, nice. Instruction developed, practicum, active, like that, hands-on. Guys, here's what I want to be sure, and I'll give you our label. We call it an action, right? Now I want to be careful here. I don't know about you, Con, but I love a lot of the words you've put in chat. Our point here, friend, is that you don't necessarily have to adapt our verbiage, but the more you identify these interaction types by what you want them to do, and you understand the fundamental difference in them, and how if you use them differently based on individual, small group, or entire class, you get a very, very different level of engagement, which is what and frankly, learning and processing, which is what we're going for here. We call this an action. Brilliant.
So then here's another, a different type of interaction. You see, we're asking them to write their definitions of formative and summative evaluation. Now, I need to give you a little context. We have already taught them about formative and summative evaluation earlier. And now we have, sometime later, a question where or an interaction where we ask them to write their definitions of those two things. What kind of a type of an interaction would you call this? Recall, yeah. Reinforcement, very good. Knowledge check, yeah. Recall is kind of what we call it. Again, this is just, this is the weakest type of interaction that there is, but sometimes it's important if you have something that is highly important where if people, you need to reinforce it over time, then these recall interactions become very helpful. But if most of your interactions are recall, then you're leaving too much instruction on the table. That is, you're not getting to where you need to be in terms of engaging thinking and moving forward in new learning. This is looking backwards in learning and reinforce what has been learned. You want to also have interactions that move people forward in how they go about learning. So use this by all means, but make sure that that is not your primary. It's very easy to do, but shouldn't be your primary interaction. Only for those areas where you determine we need to reinforce this over time.
Number 4, what are the benefits of frequent interactions? What do you think?
We're not asking you to answer this question. What's the type?
Open-ended, thought-provoking, recall, think, open-ended, open.
We've been doing a lot of this today with all of you.
Discussion, engagement, intro. Love it. we call this one collaboration or brainstorming. And the one thing that I didn't condition it with, frankly, is this could be done individually, right? But we tend to do this one, friends, in small groups to the entire class. We also tend to do it, and this is often confused with discovery because they are very close and it grays. But this is a review of things that it's almost a recall, but it's benefits that they can think of and that they might know and that they have thought about with what's been taught and discussed. Discovery pushed them beyond the knowing into things that they have not tried or done quite yet.
Yeah, so this is clearly, as we've watched your responses today, you are all skilled and you come in here with significant experience. We saw that in the polling. So a collaboration or a brainstorming is where you draw upon the experience and the knowledge that everyone has to lift the entire class in a collaboration and brainstorming. But just make sure in this one that there is room and a way for people to then capture that brainstorming. Like all of this good work that we see here, Bob has mentioned to you, we're going to gather that together and summarize that because it's so rich and make that back available to the community. Here's another type. What would you call this?
And Tanya, yeah, they tend to be more evidence-based than discovery might be. Good question.
Yeah, troubleshooting, very good. This is certainly that.
Love it.
Good. Problem solving, the moment of solve. This is a very important moment in learning. It's one of the 5 moments of learning. And really, this requires a different kind of thinking that truly engages the processing and the development of knowledge. And so going through and figuring that out and drawing upon previous experience, it's an extension of a very important type of brainstorming and collaborative learning.
And what's interesting, friends, is there's similarity in this and the last one we'll share, but power in the difference. So here's the last one of the 6 that we tend to do. What's wrong with the following rating scale? And they would give you answers. What's this one? What would you call this kind of a interaction? Analysis, polling.
Well, that's the type of, yeah, that is what that question is about there. It certainly is those things, but,
Yep. Yeah, friends, this is what we call evaluation. And it can be one of the highest order thinking of anything, right? Looking at and finding errors, having your students pair up and help each other grade each other's work and help them coach the other. There's been a lot of analysis and research around coaching. And many arguments have been for years that, well, if somebody knows the thing and you ask them to coach someone else, what value is that to the coach? Well, here's the irony. Here's the exciting thing about this, friends. There's a lot of research to support that there's a lot of value to the coach in explaining and walking someone through where they made a mistake, where they could have done better. It builds their own self-efficacy, number one. Secondly, it will stretch them in their understanding to articulate to others and evaluate where things have gone wrong. So really, really powerful one that you could use opposite recall. Remember recall earlier, number 3? Don't just do a recall, do an evaluation instead, which in the end will have them tell you what they do know and don't know.
Yep.
But the level of thinking is so much more powerful.
And make sure, in this one, you've got to give them the support that they need to make those evaluations consistently across the board. So providing checklists and other ways of helping them be able to assess is really important for this kind of an activity.
Brilliant. Awesome. So friends, different levels of things to be aware of with interactions. This is getting really into the weeds. So we're not going to necessarily read this to you. Again, this is in the recording and you'll get it in the deck. But here's the makeup, the delivery, the nuance, the timing that we have found around taking the 6 interaction types you saw a moment ago and applying them. Check out number 2, the second check. Have an average of 1 interaction every 3 to 5 minutes, friends. 3 to 5 minutes. But also look at number, boy, I wish they were numbered. It's my fault. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've heard me use this word a lot. Make interactions intentional. Don't do interactions for the sake of doing an interaction. I hope that makes sense, right? So when you're doing these 3 to 5, let me show you how crazy this can get. And again, a lot of you said earlier, I do want to hit on one other. Notice the workbook work at the end, the second from last check. And a lot of you said earlier, when you move into small group activities, when you move into whole group activities, you're going to put people in breakout rooms. It can get messy, super messy. So look at that very last check. Pre-stage or set up your interactions within your technology ahead of time. If the technology will let you pre-stage, if it doesn't, then you better have your slides together. You better be prepared for, and friends, over the gear cycles, move them into interaction types from in a graduated scale. Don't put people in breakout rooms in the first session. It's a lot. Doesn't mean you can't try to, but we use those higher level activities, or more chaotic, if that's the right word, as the group builds a cohort, as they build confidence in you as an instructor, as you get better at classroom management and juggling the balls that are online instruction. So again, bunch of checklist things to think about. Let me show you how involved this can be, friends. We want to show you an actual example. You guys check this out. And I want to be sure you see a distinction in something on the slide. This is an example of the number of gather sessions. This was a IT lab. This was that earlier work I did, I mentioned. This was an IT, highly technical, lab-based environment that we moved entirely online. Entirely online. No labs, no face-to-face labs. It was all done with virtual instruction. But check this out. And I want to be sure you understand the distinction between interactions and activity types. See the categories on the left? We came up with, because of the nature of the classroom, the nature of the topic, the nature of it being IT, we came up with these, what we called activity types, and there are 7 of them in this course. Within those activity types, friends, I'm make sure I'm explaining this right, we used discovery, recall, evaluation. Is that making sense? We use different activity types within interaction or activity categories. Check out the numbers on the right. I would challenge any class, honestly, and we heard this from all the students and the instructors. I would challenge any class to have 374 intentional interactions in a given day, 3 days, 5 days. Again, notice the activities. These were demonstrations, modeling, collaborative, case study activities. But we had 374 intentionally planned interactions across the activities. And unanimously, our students and our instructor told us exponentially more engaging than any class they'd ever done, both taught and participated in.
All right. So we've talked a lot about the workbook and its role. So I just want to quickly share a few points with you as it relates to the workbook. So one, the workbook can provide a means of capturing notes. It would be hard to do. We wondered about a workbook for this, but this isn't a true gear experience that you're having today. But in a gear world, you need to be able to capture notes. And then you want to be careful that you don't have so much capturing going on that people aren't able to think about and process, and that there's a cognitive interruption if they're trying to capture everything. So you have to strike a balance of content, either in your performance support system that you're bringing back so that they can bringing up and involving, or in the workbook itself, so that people can be content that they know that, oh, I can focus on processing and not have to focus on capturing alone. Capturing can distract from the ability to truly learn and move forward. It can be helpful to a degree, but be careful with it. And then it's very important, the fundamental role of the workbook is to facilitate activities here and to make sure that you have a place for learners to go to take the time that they need to process those activities, those interactions that you moved into the workbook that require critical thinking and time to complete. And then the next has to do with just you want to include your expand and apply assignments so that the workbook kind of holds everything together. And that can be a digital workbook if you need to, that they print out or whatever, but it needs to hold the entire cycle together. Anything else you want to say about that, Bob?
No, Kai. I mean, I just would reinforce, friends, that this and what I'm about to show you in a moment were the thing that kept the entire experience together. The workbook was the thing that they, and we've done it two different ways, by the way. We gave out the entire workbook in some case, depending on the degree to which we wanted the students, frankly, to read ahead. You want the students to plan, do some activities prior. In other cases, we would give out the workbook per gear cycle, right? Like print out chapters in a binder, right? Because we frankly didn't want them going ahead. We didn't want to overwhelm them. We wanted to manage cognitive load. Right. So this really became overwhelmingly in the feedback we did after. And guys, we did a lot of analysis in this. And I love the idea about a fillable PDF. Love that. Which we didn't have, by the way, back then, to be honest with you, when we first did this. Was that it really overwhelming by the students. They said, look, we started relying very heavily on the workbook as a way to keep up, as a way to prepare, as a way to kind of pull the whole experience together. So, friends, expand. Let's go through the other letters here as we wrap up. 26 minutes to go. You're doing terrific. And again, we understand some may have to drop off. We're probably actually going to finish a bit early, which is kind of nice. But we'll be sure to give you all this. Now, guys, we spend an awful lot of time on Gather because, candidly, if we may be, it's the thing we see most abused. And again, please take this right. We don't mean maliciously. But what we're trying to get across to you here, friends, is that a Gather session online is not a Gather session in a room, in a classroom. It really takes a very different approach. Now, again, here's the exciting thing. Remember, is that even when done brilliantly, overwhelmingly, from our learners' perspective, it was not the most powerful part of the gear model for them. In fact, it was the least important part of the gear model for them, which is the irony, because you're thinking, well, you know, I got to get this all online. I get my students to sit through this stuff. That will make or break my experience. How good my instructors are online, how engaging they are online. In our experience with gear, which we've done zillions of times, yeah, the Gather is a stake in the ground, but their favorite parts are to expand, where they take that workbook and they go out and they begin to use the EPSS, going to get to that right now, and the workbook. Remember I said there's two things that made the course sticky and applicable. Stickiness came from the workbook. Applicable came from the EPSS. And what we're showing you over here, friends, is this is a PDF with links. This is an example of one that we did. So talk low tech. You can absolutely go high tech. There's some remarkable, and you can ask us offline, there are some remarkable EPSSs that I think we should start looking at in our industry, particularly in the world we're in today. They're well worth now, if they weren't before, the investment. But an EPSS, friends, this is from Gloria Geary, 1991, is an orchestrated set of technology-enabled services that provide on-demand access, guidance, integrated information, assistance, tools, training, and advice to enable high-level job performance with a minimum support of people, minimum support of others. It is a self-efficacy tool, right? So, and yeah, I see PowerPoints with PDF, with hyperlinks. But what I want to be sure you're aware of, friends, is this is not a dumping ground. Look at that document on the right. There is a intentional structure to that PDF. Here's what we've learned in performance support, friends. There is a hierarchical approach to giving people information. We use this pyramid metaphor. The reason we use this is because the higher, as a pyramid implies, at the point at the top, it's very finite, it's very focused, it's very directed. It's also, by the way, very light and very short. At the bottom of the pyramid, it is much more robust, it's a lot more information, but guess what? It also takes a lot more time to consume. It may be harder to get to. Notice people, a very difficult resource to get to. And if you take Gloria's definition, friends, it aligns to the pyramid. She just didn't throw those words out as a list. Those words are actual different kinds of performance support you put into an EPSS, and check out this job aid. This linked PDF, low tech, has that hierarchy built into it. General resources, about, refer to this, steps, concepts, right? We use the pyramid to architect this quick reference guide for this course and throughout the course. You can provide new ones per gather that are specific to that gather, or if you go high tech, you can build an EPSS that covers and spans the entire course. But what we're going for here, friends, please take this right. Please take this right. We're not talking SharePoint here. And by that, I mean the worst case of SharePoint. I personally love SharePoint. We do some remarkable work with SharePoint. But I'm talking about the one many of us know is that dumping ground of stuff with a bunch of links under these general categories. That is not what we're talking about here. This pyramid has a structure to it. It has an experiential UI to it that makes using it for expand and apply powerful. Beyond the class. This thing lives beyond the class and was rated way higher than the workbook. The workbook was nice to get right information together. The EPSS is application. They are cheat sheets, job aids in a remarkably powerfully orchestrated way. So here's an example of an expand activity. Expand grows, it pushes their knowledge deeper. In a gather session, friends, a lot of you ask about how long, how much you cover. Gathers are quick. They have to be. In some cases, they may be very, if I might, general in what you cover. General principles. Expand is where you go deeper into those principles. It's not new stuff. It's a deeper expansion in a lot of powerful ways in their desk on their own, where they go into rich, deep stuff that we never had time to cover in class. And here's yet another one. To the right there in the blue, some checkboxy things to be aware of. And yes, Shelby, if you want to reach out to me offline, I can give you some examples if it's helpful, friend, for IT stuff. But they're not just for IT stuff, you guys. They're not just for, we build EPSSs for leadership training. We build EPSSs for sales training. We build EPSSs for onboarding. Those are what we call soft skills, friends. Perfect. Don, you want to get into my favorite, apply?
Well, let me just say something about one other thing about expand, and that is it as Bob says, it not only helps you the learners move deeper, but also translate what they're learning, help them further translate that to their own environments, and that's very important for them to be able to start to think about that and reflect on it in terms of how it works within their worlds. Now, the crucial moment experience here is apply. That's where you take what you've learned in the gather and the things that you've learned in the expand. So you have knowledge, but now you've got to have some activities where you actually apply and act upon that knowledge and that experience and what you've seen and heard in the gather session. And you want to create apply assignments that will give you some ability to then ultimately, Bob will talk about in a moment, provide feedback. So let me just show you what we mean by an apply assignment. What you see on the right is a checklist.
Sorry, Ken, my fault.
Oh,
my fault.
So what you see on the right is kind of an evaluation checklist, but on the left here is an apply assignment.
I'm sorry, I don't know what's my fault, Con. It's my fault.
No problem.
I'm trying to type in the chat, and for some reason, it's not letting me leave my. Sorry, team.
So you can see here, this is for apply assignments from our Enable Instructional Design course. So we're having them actually do things. Let me just share with you, one of the challenges in face-to-face learning is that we generally tend to run out of time for integration activities where people move beyond just completing or acting upon a specific action, but they are actually able to integrate their skill sets, integrate what they have learned into the bigger, the broader scheme of skill development. And that's what these apply assignments let you do. You can certainly target a specific skill or task, but it also allows you to integrate them together into the larger whole, which is something that we've lost the time to do in traditional, many times in traditional face-to-face learning. So that's very exciting to us. If you'd go to the next slide, Bob.
Can I jump in real quick? Yeah. My apologies, friend. And boy, you guys are so gracious in the chat. I don't know why I can't chat for some reason. It's advancing the slides. So I so apologize about the jumping around. But what I did want to talk to is something that Kenneth Stoner, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering that, my friend asked. And that is that, can we talk a little bit about what's taught in the gather and how you decide what goes in there? Issues around criticality. And then what apply can do for things that you don't cover.
Very good. So what we do is we look at, we separate, as Bob and I talked about earlier, the knowing from the doing. And in those, once we have those, we actually assess each one of those knowing and doing topics or areas according to the critical impact of failure. That is, we have a rating scale in a way in which we look, instead of looking at complexity and frequency, we want to know what is the critical impact of failure. And then in the gather session, we target those, first and foremost, those areas where the critical impact of failure are significant to catastrophic. We may treat the other areas more lightly in the gather, but it's in the expand and apply where we bring it all together in the workflow, where we create expand assignments and so forth that make up for the difference. But even then, in the expand and apply, we're going to focus in on those areas where the critical impact of failure is significant to catastrophic, as long as we have a strong enough performance support system to support people in those other areas as they move into the workflow and do what they need to do.
You're on.
All right, so feedback. I was looking and reading, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Ken.
In the gear model, the most powerful learning component of it all is in the feedback. It changes learning, really. It changes learning in a wonderful way. That we try to help our learners that come to gear understand that it's not, do your best and pay attention and get involved in the gather. But then where learning is going to happen is when you expand and apply, and then we come to this virtual feedback session. Now, it's in that feedback where we work to be guided by some measures and some ways so that we can consistently, through checklists and other things, evaluation tools, to be able to give that feedback and give it individually, but also collectively. We just had a feedback session with a group of students in Singapore last evening. And we had them bring up their work that they had done. And as they did, we gave them feedback based upon these criteria that you see here. They all had the checklist. They knew what we were going to be looking against. We had brought that into the training with examples and non-examples. But here, we were then looking at their actual output of their work, and we were talking about their process labeling, their task labeling, their supporting knowledge labeling, and other things as it related to their work. And across the board, it is here where the great ahas happen. In coaching, we know this is true. In music and other skill development areas, we know that it's all about feedback. But in all learning, it's about feedback. This is the place where learning really happens in a powerful way. And it happens because we have people actually applying what they're doing in the workflow and then getting feedback on that and adjusting accordingly.
And Kyle, I'd like to answer two things real quick, if I may. Folks, please be sure you heard Khan talk about the fact that before we go into feedback sessions, we give them the rubrics that we're going to evaluate them on. Think of life is open book, friends. Why do we hide the test from our learners? Life is the test. Application is the test. If they fail at that because we've kept something from them, that's not good instruction. So give them the evaluation for the apply so that, yeah, they're going to screw up. Fail safely. Love that, right? Allowing them to fail safely, but they fail safely because of two things. Because of number one, the EPSS helps lift them. Number two, you do give them feedback, and we learn through doing, we learn through failure, right? So that's really critical. And also be sure that you take advantage of the many resources, peers, managers that can also help with evaluation in the workflow, even outside of you. The entire burden doesn't have to fall entirely on you guys. Now, Greg, I want to answer something real quick. You said earlier about, do the expand and apply in gear one become the gather of gear two? Nope. The expand and apply are unique to each gather. But my friend, Greg, based on what happens in the feedback sessions, you will notice common mistakes. You'll notice common apply and expand places where the group didn't get it, or someone did a stunning job and did a brilliant apply, learned something remarkable through expand. By all means, bring that into the beginning of the next gather. Have it be, allow yourself some time for that, if I may, gearing up to the next gather session. And what better than to show good examples and lessons learned from what happened in between. So lastly, friends, we're about to wrap up. 11 minutes, we're gonna give you some time back. We are gonna try to walk the walk here. We're gonna give you expand and apply activities. How's that? So here are a bunch of, more than we could give you, of how you can take this deeper. You'll get the slides, you'll get the recording, all these websites, all these URLs, all these blogs, wikis, videos, depends on your modality and how deep you want to go. But here are ways to expand on all you heard us do today, including, of course, the slide deck and the recording. Here's your apply activity. Again, you'll get this when we send it out. Here's ways to get started. We call this phase one. Here are some things we really think you can do right away to take your existing courses and move them quickly into gear, not frankly, ideally, but you guys, you can get this going in a remarkable way. And here's my challenge to each of you. This is a terrible situation. This is a horrific situation, but we can emerge better. And shame on us for not taking advantage of things we could do during this difficult time to lift our learners and change the way we teach. Guys, here's my favorite part of the story about gear, and we'll wrap up here. We had this wonderful instructor that sat through this with us when it started. He was a great, great guy. He was also a very gifted ILT instructor, and he was a resistor. He was not crazy about this, but he risked. He was our first guy. When this ended, this is what he said, you guys. He goes, not only did Gear change me for online instruction, and I am a full advocate, I would prefer, listen to this, I would prefer to do virtual instruction over classroom. Listen to that. But he also said, when I went back to the classroom, I never taught the same way again. When I went back to ILT, I never taught the same way again. And we are sitting at a point in time where we can emerge better. So, friends, here's us, some more resources. We do have a public course of this where it's in Gear, where you walk through building a course in Gear, and if it's something you're interested in, we can tell you more about it. But it's another resource. And if you want the recording, I know a lot of you came in through LinkedIn and other places. We intentionally did not collect emails and stuff. We did not want you to feel that this was that kind of a thing. By all means, if you, I will post it in LinkedIn and other places, but if you email Jenna, she'll be sure that you get it. We hope you're all well. We're thinking about all of you. You're in our thoughts and prayers. We hope it was helpful. Con, you want to wrap up?
Yeah, our desire is just to give you as much as we can in these 90 minutes for you to be able to move forward and take your existing courseware and do good things with it. Hopefully that's happened. And again, thank you for the remarkable way in which you participated today.
Thanks, friends. Be well and be in touch.